Good afternoon. Welcome to Facebook Live at the New York State Museum. I'm Connie Frisbee Houde. I'm the curator of the Clothing and Textile Collection, and I am currently working on and have been working for probably the last 3 years on a major exhibition of clothing from our collection. It's called Unveiled, 3 Centuries of Wedding Wear. And I'm going to show you some that has to do with that and a little bit about what our collection is. So here behind me is the way that we store our dresses that are strong enough that can be hung on hangers. Usually the hangers are padded so that the shoulders keep their shape. And this starts from the earliest and goes down our storage area to the later. So all of these are cataloged. They're a part of the database. And so when I started to work on this exhibition, I went through the database to find out what wedding dresses we had. How many did we have in the collection? And then we went through and chose ones that related to having good stories, represented changes in style, that represented various different types of people. We tried to be as diverse as possible, but because many of these pieces have come in across time, we don't have the diversity that we would really like to have. So we made do with what we have. So today what I'm going to share with you is 3 of the dresses that will be in the exhibition. The first one is the earliest piece, and it's from 1797. It belonged to Sarah, or she was called Sally, Ackert New. She was born in 1775, and then she died somewhere in the 1850s. This is what it would be known sort of as an empire style, and it was a transition between, I'm going to move over here, the earlier 18th century petticoat and gown with a very corseted in the middle. So you get to see a little bit of the difference in the changes in style. Now, one of the neat things about this particular dress is that we have a story that comes along with it. And her father took a sloop down the Hudson River that was filled with grain, and he sold the grain in New York City, bought the fabric, and then came back up. Now, some of you may say, sloop, what's a sloop? A sloop is a sailboat that they went up and down the Hudson River, and it was the way goods got back and forth from New York City. And this is a great drawing that gives you an idea of the number of boats that could be out on the Hudson. It could take anywhere from a couple of days to a week, depending upon the weather, to get from the Albany to the city. Now here also we have what's called a fichu, which is this lace and cotton piece that's been embroidered, and this would have been filled in the neckline so that when she got married in a church, which she did get married in a church, it would be a little more presentable than showing bare bosom. It ties in the front. This is the inside, which is a linen, and it would have been pinned in place. Yes, straight pins. And it's got this beautiful little back to it. And this is all, as you may realize, sewing machines didn't come in until the 1850s. So this is all hand sewn. Beautiful lustrine silk. Oops. Now, one of the other things that we're trying to do with this exhibition is also to talk about the men and what the men might have worn. So this could have been the accompanying male garment, We don't really have an idea of what was actually worn with that, but this could be a country gentleman. This family was from Hillsdale, got married in Claverick, and then these are shoes that possibly could have been the type that she would have worn. Beautiful little leather shoe with a little label in the front of it. It's in the inside. It was sold in Boston, and shoes in this time were made only on one shaped last, so that you didn't have a right and left shoe. It became a right and left shoe after you wore them for a while. The little ties that you see here would have gone around the ankle and tied it to the leg. Let's see. The next dress is from 1859, and it has two bodices. This one that you see in the front here has little short sleeves, and it's off the shoulders. And this would have been worn in the evening for a ball or a fancy dress event. And this is more of the day bodice, where it's tied up to the neck and with what they call pagoda sleeves that you can see here. Very fitted in the bodice. And this was worn by Melissa Faulkner Davis. She was born in 1840, married November 15th, 1859. She died in 1928. And at this time, the tartan was something that was made popular by Queen Victoria. And here's an illustration of Queen Victoria with a tartan sash. Here's another dress using tartan in it. And then over on the right is what the male garment would have looked like. And then this is an ambrotype of Melissa and her husband, which is really unusual to have and great to see. So we can sort of use this to try and recreate some of the accessories and so on that might have been worn with the dress. Now here you're only seeing the bodice. So the skirt was just then pleated to the waist. These are what are called cartridge pleats. And you can see on the inside here, they're only stitched on one side. This again is all done by hand, even though the sewing machine had been invented by this time. But being stitched like that, it could hinge out so that the skirt would be very, very full. And another interesting fact from these dresses is because they hit the ground, they were finished with a piece of wool binding. You can see it here on the back as well. And that would hit the ground, and that would wear out first. So this could easily be replaced where the silk itself was not so easy to replace. Now today, if we wanted to clean this, you would just take it to the dry cleaner and get it cleaned. You wouldn't think anything about it. Then that was not what was done. You wore a lot of undergarments underneath it, so your skin was not really touching the original fabric as much. And we also have the family saved his vest, which I think is really kind of cool. It's much more usual to have women save their clothing than men save theirs. So this is just a very simple brocade. The back is of a cotton, so that you didn't have to buy as much fabric or spend as much money on silk to go all the way around. And one of the things that we have had to do with some of these dresses is to do some repairs. For instance, this dress had been taken apart to be worn by someone who was much larger. But you could still see all the stitch marks for where the darts had been, so I have put that back together so that it will go on a mannequin and look appropriate. The third dress in the collection that I want to share with you is one that was worn by two different brides. It was first worn by Jane Walker Russell Stewart in 1917, and then it was remade in 1941 for her daughter Janet to wear. And this was also something that was quite common, and particularly in the 40s, when it was the beginning of the war and fabric was was beginning to be restricted, although there were wedding gowns were an exception. But in order to get some of the beautiful fabrics, many brides chose to remake their mother's dresses. So with this, it's difficult to know exactly what this dress would have looked like in 1917 because we don't have photos of it. But this is what it was remade to in 1941. This is definitely the original silk, and this lace could have been used in some way, or this lace itself could have been an addition. Now this dress was originally made by Blenda in Chicago. And one thing that's kind of neat about this is they still saved that waist tape and the maker's label for this remake. They didn't get rid of that. This also has a train that goes with it, and I believe there's a veil as well. So we did some research to try and figure out who Blenda was, and the Chicago History Museum has a gown in their collection, which is a rather unusual cut, but it may have been that Blenda did unusual designs, more aesthetic dress than others, and this was that particular woman. She was a society woman, and so she spent good money on that dress. One of the other things that we have in our collection is we have photographs from the White Studio, which was a studio in Schenectady that began to photograph largely in the 1930s, but they did some before that. But what we have in our collection are the 30s up until the 80s even. And so we've been able to go in and look at that collection and be able to compare. For instance, this one that maybe it's a little dark and it's a little hard to see, but that's 1917. So that could be what that original dress was made, and how this one was remade. So in the 40s, there's a lot of different things that could be done. And here you have a woman who's just wearing a suit. She's in the center with a big white hat and holding the white flowers. But this collection has been really helpful to us in sort of looking at what were the trends, what were other people wearing and using, and so on. So that gives you a view. And this is our little friend back here. One of the things is what kind of mannequins do we use to put these dresses on? And these are from a company in London that has made different sized mannequins that will fit the very small garments that we don't want to force onto mannequins that are too large. And we don't have those lanky models, And I've been making paper wigs, and she's being socially distanced and proper here.
Here's a question on how did you make her hair?
The hair is made from a material called raffia that is twisted, and what you do is you untwist it, and it is glued to a foundation, and then you curl the pieces, and yeah, it's been fun. So do we have any other questions from anybody out there?
What did they do for coverings in the pandemic in the early 1900s?
They could have worn masks just like we do. You know, all of us around here have been making our own masks. That's one that I made. So bandana, anything. And they might not have understood that that was something that they needed to do. So thank you very much for listening, and keep watching because we'll have updates.